Hi, friends and neighbors. Samuel here was watching a video the other day and had some observations. Would you like to share them?
No, actually, there was no particular observation. I just, I was trying to figure out the other day, well, like kind of why I wanted to talk, and I can't really pin it down to one thing. I think perhaps I'm in a better mental state than we last talked 2 years ago, and I was looking for just some good discourse, and I respect your capacity to kind of hold dialogue, to explore new ideas, um, and uh, and so yeah, and maybe that's the thing. I'm just stimulus seeking, and I was looking for good conversation.
Well, I'll tell you, people's mental space, where they are in life, can change very dramatically and be hugely impactful and have nothing to do with anything other than circumstances. Like a couple months ago, I was all over the place, but now I'm in a much better place than I was myself 2 years ago or even 6 months ago.
Mhm.
So it makes a big difference what's going on in your life as to how you feel about life in general. It's like people want to say, well, you gotta just have the right attitude. You really need to have good things happen so that the attitude you get is positive.
Mhm. I think a big part of it is there's been a few stabilizing factors in my life. So I got married between the last time that we spoke, and me and my wife are doing well. And then one of the large reasons I joined the military is because it kind of covers so many of the intangible things you have to worry about in life, and some of the tangible things too. So I can pursue my own mental interests, but at least I know that I'm going to have a stable paycheck. I know where I'm going to roughly be, and I know that there's some reasonable route of progression. And but the main reason is stability and security.
And also good intentions.
If I make it that far, and so that there's options at the end of my contract with what I want to do. And I would say that the last factor that really contributed to a change in my mentality over the last 2 years was when you go through some real psychological adversity, you have to develop new tools, new perspectives with which to look at the world. And I think ultimately you get a lot more balanced because if you're not so attached to your previous version of who you believed you were, then you can kind of grow and adapt with the circumstances. And then when you encounter those same problems, you're not as perturbed.
So do you think that the increased I guess pressure on you was from joining the military?
No, I would say actually the military reduced a lot of pressure, because it's basically if you follow the structure, even if you don't always agree with it, you just follow the structure, you'll mostly be fine. And so if you're paying attention and you're pretty observant and you walk in and you can kind of capture new systems and figure out how to adhere to it, it's not a huge struggle. It's mostly, I would say,
You mentioned adversity. You mentioned adversity. What were you referring to?
Just now.
Well, before you said when you come across a period of mental adversity,
Mhm.
and then blah 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 blah. I was asking basically, was the mental adversity you're referring to like basic training, or was it something else?
No, I don't. I think it was prior to the military. So I don't view the military as something that's been too strenuous for me. Um, it was more just the worldview that you kind of build over the course of being a child to a teenager to a young adult, becomes severely compromised and falls apart, and you kind of have to put yourself back together, um, and and you're not after you go through a significant mental struggle, you're not necessarily the same human being, because in order to adapt to the changes, you kind of adapted to who you were. And so I would say that I had a more ossified sense of self, and then by going through some struggles, I became a lot more adaptable and kind of accepting of the changes that come with life.
What parts of your identity did you have to let go?
Certainty. So if I was very certain that this is the way that the world was, and I thought, okay, I have this part locked down, I cannot be wrong about this part. I know. So essentially, just a maintained arrogance. I was able to kind of place doubt into myself and place uncertainty into areas where I was previously certain, which allowed me to better adapt. So I realized that there's a profound power to being highly uncertain and doubting yourself, because I could think I'm right and actually be wrong, and I could think that I'm wrong and I could actually be right. So and then I applied this also to other people, and it's made me a lot better at navigating, quote unquote truth.
Okay. I mean, the thing is, all people at all times are trying to get some parts of life to stay put, right? Like to be static so that they can do their work while that doesn't change. It's just that people want different kinds of areas of life to be that, to take on that role. So for me, I want like words and logic to stay put. Of course, when you're dealing with different people, they've got a different relationship with words and logic, right? So for them, it might be something they want to not have stay put. They want it untethered. The bottom line is, attentionally, we all require, in order to pay attention to something, that some corresponding other thing stay put, be static. Even though basically nothing in reality is static, we need things to stay static so we can analyze them. Just some observations. Anyway, so you feel as though more flexibility was what liberated you.
Yes, and then also finding any expectation, and then kind of applying the opposite expectation as well, and then realizing both are possible, and whatever happens, it's your reality, and so you have to deal with it, and that's okay. So a good example is you like, for example, I got married, right? I want my marriage to go well. It is going well, but it might not go well. And so there's two realities, and one in which we stay together and one in which we don't. And so there's one that I would like, but no matter what happens, I need to be able to adapt to whatever occurs. And that's not to throw something under the bus, but it's to be able to acclimate to whatever reality presents to me, because whatever I think to be stable might actually be unstable. And then that way I'm not asserting myself in a kind of fixed form where I'm not able to adapt correspondingly to whatever pressures are applied.
But then, can you ever really relax and settle into a marriage, taking for granted that it's not under any threat? I mean, like, for example, when you right now, you didn't, before starting this call, say, "Now look, so things go as expect. I'll have this call with Eric, but an earthquake could happen and drop the ceiling on my head and kill me." So it's like, at some point, you gotta not be stressing out about bad possibilities, right?
I could try and, like, let's say, rank order possibilities by what is most probable, and or more probable and less probable. And so it's not probable that the ceiling is going to come down on me, even though that there is some minute probability that could occur. And so it's a possibility that exists. It's not something I'm going to pay a lot of conscious attention to, because it's very, very unlikely.
But something like a divorce or a failure of a marriage, it's one of those either 100% or 0%. It's not really a probability. Either you're doomed to fail no matter what because you're incompatible, or you stick it out forever, in which case it's like paying insurance on a house that never burns down. What do you think about that?
Well, I can't really unsee the possibility that I've already seen, and so I've seen the possibility that it could occur, and I've seen the possibility that it won't occur, and so I have to contend with that. And
Well, how much do you have to keep it in mind, though, besides just you can't unsee the possibility, but most of the time you aren't actively thinking about that possibility. You know, you can't think about everything all the time.
I wish I could. Um, I wish I could. A lot of times I struggle because I feel like I'm quite limited in my scope of being able to perceive enough data points, enough um, possibilities. I'm constantly trying to figure out what is it that I'm missing in terms of um, my perception. So I could make a judgment based on what I've perceived, but if I ultimately miss some data points, then my judgment will be flawed. And so and likely every judgment I make will be flawed because it's coming through a person, and people are capable of being fallible because I'm a person, and people are capable of being infallible or being fallible. Then I too am capable of being fallible.
Yeah, but some judgments are binary and some judgments are holistic. So it's like if you're saying, what's the best choice way for me to proceed here, then you might have a compromise like I did earlier where I was watching the soccer game and I peed in this empty container that I'd gotten from a restaurant. And then I poured it out into the toilet and flushed it because it minimized the amount of time I was away from the game. I wouldn't miss a goal, you know? But somebody might say, well, why didn't you just wait till half was over to go pour it out? Well, because I didn't want to run any risk of spilling the pee. So the thing is, in that instance, you've got a good example of how those kind of judgments that are holistic matters require what you're talking about, multiple data points, right? And if you have inadequate amount of data points, you may make the wrong judgment call. In contrast, legalistic language does not require that. It's very binary. So you can make judgments about, say, what a contract says and what it obligates you to, and be very clear about it without getting any data outside of the language of the contract.
Well, so to touch upon your decision to pee, to not miss the game, like there's trade-offs to every decision. So the way I see that is you picked a decision that most people wouldn't pick, but that doesn't mean that it's for you, it was within the scope of the decisions that you could possibly make. And so where you're weighing a possibility that other people wouldn't weigh, it seems that you had reasoning that led to a decision.
Not really. I just looked around for somebody to pee and peed in it, and then it was after I emptied it and flushed it that I started thinking about how that experience there linked to TE. And then I asked Rachel a question about it to see if it would reveal TE polar or something. And it was an unclear answer, but I mean, like, it was unclear what it meant. But the point is, those kind of decisions do necessarily require trade-offs, but that's not the case for all kinds of decisions. So every decision may have an opportunity cost. In other words, if you choose one thing, then you have to not choose the other thing, right? But that's a little bit different than trade-offs. Like, I made a trade-off of a minute of game time to pour out the pee to avoid a small amount of risk that I knock the pee over. That's a trade-off. That's a TE kind of decision. But like, whether or not I'm going to go complain to the pharmacy depends entirely on what they've said to me. And there aren't any trade-offs there. Either they say something dumb that I can go beat them up with their own words and make them give me my drugs, or they don't, in which case I don't have enough ammunition to go to war. those kind of decisions aren't trade-offy. They're being dictated by words, I think. But I don't know. I could be just speculative what I'm saying.
I have a question too. So you said TE polar, but you're pretty certain of your type though, right? You're not
But Rachel's TE polar.
Mhm.
Yeah, I'm not TE polar, but Rachel is. So I was asking her a question to see if asking a question about that would reveal her TE polar. To
Oh,
see
like
if I could
do that?
Well, yeah, I asked her a question about, which was basically this. Given the fact that I went into the bathroom and put pee into the toilet and flushed it either way, why didn't I just go pee in the bathroom? And what do you think the answer is?
And you don't have pause. You can't pause the game.
Correct. Not on live TV. Not on that day. I can't pause it. I could have paused it. I've been watching it online here. I could have paused it, but I was watching it on the regular cable TV.
So the question is, do I think that was? Can you rephrase it?
Why didn't I just go sit down and pee in there? Since I went into the bathroom and put pee in the toilet and in either circumstance.
Well, I have a general idea that people just seem to want to do the thing that's giving them stimulus, like the thing that's internally getting them high. So the thing so for you receive more good drugs and less bad drugs by making the decision that you did than if you had went in the bathroom and done that. And so if it was the opposite way and you would have received more happy drugs for going and peeing and less bad drugs, then
Okay,
you
well,
would
all of that is none of that is wrong, but the answer is because peeing is the longest duration portion of that activity. The walking to the bathroom, the flushing the toilet, the walking back into this room, those are very quick. So the actual peeing part is long enough taking that I might much more likely to miss a goal if I pee in there than if I pee in here and carry it in there. So it's purely a time, like an evaluation of where can I multitask, if I
also
pee in here, then I can watch the game while peeing. So
do you want me to pass so you can?
I'm sorry, go ahead. Go ahead.
No, just because every time I'll start talking and then you're about to hit your pipe and then and then you start talking, you never get a chance. Do you want to?
No, that's all I had to say.
I think it also could be it could be a novelty thing, but I don't know if you've done that before. Perhaps it's possible. But versus doing the thing that you've done over and over and over again, which is going to the restroom and being in the toilet, you did something different. Maybe you're more enticed by the possibility of doing something new, but I could be correct.
No, I mean, I really think it was as straightforward as I really had to pee and I didn't want to stop watching the game. But you know how soccer is different than other sports, right? Soccer, you cannot stop watching it for 1 second, or else that's when they score the goal. They're very, yeah, they're very all of a sudden, surprise, there's a goal. You can't anticipate it. You can't be like, okay, nothing's gonna happen for a few minutes. There's just, you can see that with baseball, kind of.
So would you say that you like it for the anticipatory effect it has on you? Like,
Yeah. I mean, that is one of the things that makes soccer fun is that you got a full half of uninterrupted sport, except for all the rolling around and pretending your ankles are hurt.
I find that to be one of the more difficult aspects to watch of the sport because It seems inherently kind of manipulative and easy to kind of root out because you could just have a panel of people that watch the tape and just go, yeah, that guy faked it. You know, if somebody genuinely gets elbowed in the face because they jump for a header and somebody wasn't watching out, that's one thing. But when people take dives to get advantages, they're incentivized to take those dives because they want to win. But
but why do they have to take the dives? Because of this play the advantage rule. So if you kick me right in the shin but you don't steal the ball from me, I keep running with the ball, right?
Mm-hmm.
And then basically a foul never gets called. So because soccer has this playing the advantage thing, anytime you get fouled, you have to fall down and make a big deal of it, or it will never get called. So it's like there's something, they need to do something about it. But I don't know, like women's soccer is better. Chicks don't do that nearly as much.
Why do you think that is?
I think because they're trying to prove themselves tough, whereas the dudes are saying we are already tough. We need to prove ourselves incredibly fragile, so we get these foul calls.
So could you say as a generality that the males are more achievement oriented towards the winning and the females are more oriented towards what people think of them?
No, I think that although that would be a reasonable conclusion to draw based on what I said, but that is the correct conclusion to draw from what I said. But no, I don't think that. I think it's because women's soccer started out as American soccer, and Americans aren't pussies like that. We're not gonna fall down and roll around and pretend to be hurt, unless we're the men who get trained in Europe to do that. If you watch MLS, it doesn't happen nearly as much. It barely happens at all. So I don't know.
One thing I wanted to actually speak about too, because I was going through the live stream messages on our previous videos, is that even though you typed me as ENTP, there wasn't any general consensus in the chat. And it was kind of all over the place.
I think you're an ESTJ.
Think so?
Based on this conversation so far, I suspect, but would not type you as this because I haven't typed you, but I suspect you're an ESTJ. And here's why. Here's why. Because of your analysis of like the way you described, well, you didn't do what you normally do every time, just go into the bathroom, go to the bathroom. Instead, you tried something new. That's second slot SI leading into third slot NE is what it sounds like. Hold on one second. Hey.
Hi, how are you doing?
I'm fine. How are you?
Good, good. Are you all better?
I mean, I'm still a little bit sick, but more or less. I got my Adderall. I had to go yell at those fuckers, let me tell you.
Well, I'm glad you got it.
Yeah, they tried to tell me it's going to be 2 weeks. I said, and I got it on Monday. It was 2 days late,
Yeah. I know, it's crazy. I think the extended one, they still don't have it.
So I'm in a video conference right now. So what's going on?
Okay. Yeah, Jeff is wondering if he can show you, his history thing. He finished it.
Okay, well, later, like maybe 6 or something.
Can it be like later than that, like something like?
Yeah. We're gonna be up late. We gotta move a lot of shit still.
I see. Okay, so maybe 8:30.
That's fine.
Okay, great. Thank you so much.
Thanks. Bye.
Yeah.
Sorry about that.
So what I'm trying to do in the moment where I was offering an alternative analysis is I'm trying to discover the underlying behavior and the motivation, because what I tend to see with people is that we're bundles of competing aspects. So for example, there's a part of us that wants to remain loyal, but there's also a part of us that wants to adventure. There's a part of us that wants to do the thing that feels safe, and there's a part of us that wants to do the thing that is more risky. And so wherever I tend to draw conclusions, at least in regards to my behavior, and then trying to project that out and see that within other people's behaviors. I see the explanation that people typically give, and I see that there's also alternative explanations that exist underneath if you try and account for these competing aspects. So I don't tend to see humans as a single entity. I see humans more as like a hive. So there's going to be all these competing aspects that lead to that sometimes get their hands on the control module, and then generate certain outputs, and then we'll explain it away and say it came from me, or I was acting out of character, that was not me. And so I'm constantly trying to see those alternative modules operating in myself and other people.
I think it's odd that you frame it in terms of motivations, though, because it's really like attentional weaknesses and strengths. So I'm much more susceptible to some kinds of mistakes than other kinds of mistakes. Everybody might make a mistake in some area or another, right? Everybody might make a choice that turns out to be a poor choice. Let's say I might make a choice to buy something and then get buyer's remorse. That'd be an SE mistake. I might make a choice to make a joke that nobody thinks is funny and everyone cringes. That'd be an FE mistake. I might make a choice to toss aside something I really love for something shiny. That'd be an FI mistake. The thing is, attentionally, we each are designed to make certain kind of mistakes and definitely not make other kind of mistakes. So it's like I'm prone to mistakes where I forget to do stuff that I'm supposed to do. That's an SI mistake. I'm prone to mistakes where I don't understand the scope of the value I have for something that's important to me until after it's gone. That'd be an FI mistake. And then I have a tendency to not pull the trigger necessarily when I need to pull the trigger on shit and just kind of like hum and haw. That'd be an SE mistake, because that's my 4th, 7th, and 8th slot function. So I think that's how it really is for everybody, is that those areas of attention, 4th, 7th, and 8th, are going to be where you make your mistakes in life.
Mistakes are also dependent on the person that's observing it. So like what one person determines to be a mistake and another person determines to be a mistake could be completely different. And so
right, but each of those metrics is itself a metric. So in other words, for certain kinds of questions, we know it's a subjective metric that gets applied. And in which case, what you're saying makes perfectly good sense. In other cases, we know that it's an objective metric that gets applied because it's, say, a parsing of language or something. In those instances, it's not the case that observers observing things differently impact our experience of reality. So if, in fact, I am getting arrested for drunk driving, but the people observing think that I'm participating in a film shoot, it doesn't change the fact that I'm going to jail.
So by objective, do you mean completely removed from context? Because if it means
No.
Consensus.
No. Objective simply means that something is evaluated according to a standard disinterested calculus. So, for example, Whether or not that contract obligates me to take your dog sailing is not a question in dispute unless the contract is written really poorly, right? It's that we can all objectively agree that this sentence says this thing. And when dealing with word arguments, we always have to deal with the reality that some people don't want to evaluate word arguments against objective criteria, but also that if those word arguments are about matters of public concern, that's the only healthy way to deal with them, is by an objective agreed upon calculus where warrants, claims, impacts are presented. They are evaluated by a adversarial individual, and if it sustains scrutiny, it withstands it, and if it doesn't, it doesn't, you know? So basically, when we use the word objective, most of the time when people use the word, what they mean is a disinterested calculus. So a referee is objective because he doesn't prefer if the Clippers win or the Lakers win. He prefers to call all the fouls correctly. That's, in other words, he's not an interested party. So generally, when people talk about someone being objective, they're talking about that, exercising a disinterested calculus rather than an interested calculus. However, you can also refer to data as objective because it's data that all people can access. They don't necessarily have to access it all, but that no part of the data is only available to somebody privately as part of their own experience.
So in the case with the referee, consciously they may claim objectivity, that they don't care, but that's not accounting for the parts of themselves they're not aware of. So they could have some sort of subconscious bias that leads them to making certain calls.
Well, that assumes that those parties are FI types, that they don't have conscious TI. If you have conscious TI, then you're by default objective, and you will be strangely, weirdly blind and make mistakes when it comes to, you need to be caring about your own subjective shit here. I'll help. You can't help. You've got a little kid you need to take care of. You know, like that's the sort of thing a TIFE person might do. They might be too much of a team player and forsake what actually they need to take care of for their own business because they care about helping other people and being a team player, right? An FI type is going to think genuine objectivity doesn't exist, that everybody's guided by their biases because FI is the deliberative function that is subjective or interested in its calculus. So as a matter of fact, I'm very disinterested. I'm not evaluating anything at any point, hardly ever, in terms of how it matters to me. I'm just evaluating in terms of whether it's correct or not, which is why, like, people come and they want to talk about, say, abortion as an issue. I'll say, well, here are all the realities of the matter. And, you know, if you're going to make this argument, you can't make this one. And if you're going to make that one, you can't make this one. But, you know, I don't have a position on it, right? Because I'm just evaluating the arguments on their merits. It's true that people have bias, right? But if you watch 10 basketball players try out for a team, and 9 of them are shitty, and 1 of them's fantastic, you're going to be able to say, get that fantastic one, cut the shitty ones. Pretty much anyone will be able to say that. If you are the brother of one of the shitty ones, then you might subjectively be biased and go, I want my brother on the team. But you'll be proven wrong by the fact that he's shitty soon enough.
Well, in that case, you've kind of stated your bias, and so you're selecting the position of what your bias is in favor of, and so that seems reasonable. But to make a claim that you're disinterested in two parties,
And I wasn't saying you're selecting in favor of your bias on purpose. I'm saying imagine an individual whose brother is one of the shitty players, but because he loves his brother so much, he is blinded to the actuality of what he is seeing. And in that instance, what happens is they genuinely believe that the thing they wanted to be the case was the case. So if you get like an ESFP, they want to be, say, an ENTP, but they don't consider at all really whether the various things they're saying are consistent with each other. If they're telling a complete narrative that makes sense about their being. So you're not an ESFP, but you have this quality of NI resistance that comes with NI polar. Things often have to be one thing only and not something else also.
Okay, so the way I see that is there's an objective reality that exists. So if we're making that claim that there's something
Now, if that's not the case, look, the thing is that destroys the meaning of the word. Let's use it operationally. People refer to objective data when that data is accessible equally by all parties. I mean, maybe not literally equally accessible by all parties, but in other words, there's nothing hidden that only some people can see, right? That's when data is called objective. When people are called objective, someone is either attributing to them a disinterested calculus that they've made, that they've been a good judge or referee, or they're saying you need to exercise that kind of objectivity. Or if they're talking about them being subjective, usually people mean you're wrong when they say you're subjective, but that's insane, of course, because it depends on the matter being calculated, whether an interested or a disinterested calculus is appropriate.
So okay, so it seems like there's a difference in the way that I'm using the definition of objectivity and the way that you're using it. So to use a different word, there's physical objects that exist, right? We could both touch a table, for example, but our interpretations of the table are going to be different. And so if you had 1,000 people that look at that table, you're going to have minor variations, perhaps across them, and even in some cases larger variations. And so you're going to get 1,000 different interpretations of the same external physical object.
Except that's not true. And the reason it's not true is because the vast majority of physical objects aren't interpreted. They're identified with NI, not interpreted with NE. Identity, things have an identity. So Mary Had a Little Lamb is an entity. It has a clear identity. It's got a melody and words to it, right? You could say, well, it's really just the same as these other songs, but with the notes in different orders. But you'd be missing the point. Things with identity are known by their identity. They're not deliberated about.
So I suppose what I mean by that is throughout the course of 1,000 people's lives, they've come across different tables. They have different memories of tables. They have different experiences with tables. And so when that object is incurred from the external and triggers some sort of internal construct, they're going to have a different interpretation of that. So what I'm claiming is that we're essentially interpreting reality. That's what every single human being is doing.
Like you're saying, if you see a table, it triggers an internal construct about a table. Is that what you're saying?
Correct.
Except that's not true. Just as I don't have any attention directed towards opening the door, it's just habituated, right? And I use my right hand because I'm right-handed. So is it the case that we don't require any attention to be directed towards that table? We identify it and know what it is with our intuition and afford it no further attention. We
no
conscious put things on top of it.
You're not affording any conscious attention to it.
Okay, but the thing is, if you want to talk about subconscious or unconscious attention, the thing is, there is no way you pay attention unconscious or subconsciously. It is the case that certain attentional manners are things you remember more or less. So the best definition of conscious or unconscious is a function is conscious when an individual attending via that function remembers instances of it. It's the same definition for existentiality. So for something to exist, you need to have instances of it. And so yes, like introverted intuition is my unconscious function, is an unconscious function for me. What that means is I'm not paying attention with it most of the time. It doesn't mean that it's running somehow attentionally anyway and informing things. To the extent that it does, those elements of it are either conscious or observable, if not remembered, you know? Like I think the 8th slot function is the least conscious function. I can never remember or quite pin down the moment from when I go from being lazy to doing something. I don't know how it happens. I don't know when it happens. It's a strange mystery to me. So I think that's the case for every type with their 8th slot function. I noticed it with Rachel. Her 8th slot function of SI is very, very unconscious. That's to say, she remembers very few instances of paying attention that way.
Well, by your same claim that the 8th slot is very unconscious, I'm fairly conscious of, for example, when I'm using FE.
Okay. Well, the real question is, are you conscious of when you fail to use it?
Yes.
Okay. Well, that would be contraindicative of ESTJ based on what I just said, for sure. And I don't have any. I'm not interested in telling you you're convincing you're ESTJ, but I do sense like the way you were describing people as these complicated bundles of things. It's very not NI, but who knows? That's just one thing you said. You know, it could be indicative of something, or it could be not representative of something. I don't know. I haven't been trying to type you.
So I suppose when we're born, you could think of it as a more unified self-construct. And over time, we compartmentalize into chunks. You could think of different masks. You could think of different instincts. And these parts might become pseudo-autonomous. So in some way, do you know why the noise is doing that?
Do I know what?
Why the noise is doing that? It's chirp.
I guess it must be feedback from the mic.
Okay.
Let me bring the mic closer to me.
Okay. So the way I see it is that these internal parts, they're pseudo-autonomous. So kind of like one branch on a tree is connected to another branch. If you connect it to its central part, one branch might look at another branch if it was pseudo-autonomous and think it was different than the other branch and say, I am the tree. And the other part goes, no, I'm the tree.
Well, but if that's happening, why are my arms arguing with me over control of my body?
So one self-construct, you could say, is in control of the central control panel or the control mechanisms and is operating the body.
I think you're on the wrong track here with these constructs, because remember, people are processes moving through time. They have a finite number of hours to pay attention and a finite number of ways in which attention can be paid. Any paying of attention in one way is necessarily definitionally under or not paying attention or counter paying attention to some other thing. So right now I'm TI2ing this. I'm logically parsing out how we ought understand language and its unique role of describing reality, which is a tricky role for it to have because it is fundamentally a mapping tool, not a reality capture tool. So the bottom line is, because I'm parsing in this way, I'm not really thinking right now about, for example, what you want out of this conversation. Maybe you don't want a bunch of pushback from me. You probably don't. This is me not prioritizing FE and or not prioritizing FI. And this conversation is also an example of me not prioritizing FI because I've got tons of shit to do right now. I've got all this stuff I'm supposed to be doing, and it's stuff that I want to do and plan to do, but then I just was like, well, I'll talk to this guy, you know. So this is me not prioritizing FI, right? But that's how all functions work. Anytime you're paying attention in one way, it's at the expense of another way of looking at things. If you are, say, SI tool, and you know, based on what you've learned, what you remembered, and experiences you've had in the past, you're going to think that, well, that's the only way you can know things. Just like I'm going to think, if I didn't know so much about cognitive functions, that logically parsing for consistency and correctness and legitimacy is the only way to determine the status of something. And in reality, how much you like it is just as powerful a way of determining status, but it's not compatible with it.
So first off, would you prefer to do the things that you wanted to do?
No, now I'm in this conversation. It's interesting. I'm interested. And yet, nevertheless, my decision to join this conversation in the first place was an example of my FI polar not prioritizing this stuff I'm supposed to do. It's fine because I'm going to be up all night anyway. I'll get it.
So the way I see language is it's a complex tool, and essentially what it's trying to convey is meaning. So fundamentally, what it seems that is being conveyed in communication between two human beings is meaning, or even between two animals. So you could imagine some sort of like abstract ball of meaning, which doesn't have any words attached to it or any imagery,
then it wouldn't have any meaning. You cannot imagine such a thing. You cannot imagine a person with no body, arms, legs, or face or head any more than you can imagine an abstract set of something that conveys meaning that doesn't have words or icons in it.
Can I finish the?
Yeah, sure.
All right, so we're imagining it as physical, to just so we can talk about a physical object, but so there's this meaning is inherently makes sense to me, but this I can't construct this to you until I encode it. So I can use words, I can use tone, I can use facial expression, my hand movements. I can use many different tools to encode this meaning and deliver it to you. And then the impetus is that's the impetus on me. And then for you, it's to decode it. And then once there's never going to be perfect 100% transmission across that medium, because the thing that I'm transmitting, I'm trying to encode it into a shared medium. If you spoke Chinese, there would be a lot more difficulty. I'd have to use, I'd have to rely more on other mediums because we couldn't rely on the language medium as much.
Well,
and
sure.
so
When you communicate, you create objective data with your words. Your words become objective data.
correct. And then where there's many people will tend to assume that there's 100% transmission, where I've taken this, imagine this ball, if I encode it perfectly and you decode it perfectly, in your mind you would have the same metaphysical, so to speak, ball. And
no,
so
because you have a different relationship to the speech act. So you're the one making the speech act. You've got your illocutionary purposes, unspoken purposes, and you've got your locutionary meanings. I'm going to receive the locutionary meanings. I may interpret illocutionary stuff based on the locutionary meanings, But my relationship with your speech act is fundamentally different than your relationship with your speech act. In other words, we're not trying to understand each other when we speak. We're trying to each do our own thing as speakers. If a conversation goes smoothly, plenty of mutual understanding of words occurs. But the other important thing to remember is different kinds of statements do different kind of work. So if you're describing, say, an event that occurred in the past, it's doing a certain kind of work. If you're describing an abstract model of how people pay attention, it's doing a different kind of work. It's saying these are the process phenomena that explain why people are skewed so much. Meow, 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 meow. Now, if you don't have NI like in a strong spot, you're likely to say that's not the case. That in fact, that people are meow, 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 meow. And they're capable of changing and evolving themselves in any way they want just by applying themselves towards learning things.
So you're saying high, just to clarify, high NI correlates strongly or poorly with self-adaptability, or like conscious self-willed adaptability?
Poorly.
So high NI users are largely incapable of willfully applying a set of words that I suppose could encode like a belief that they're going to act upon.
That's not what I'm saying. I'm saying that NI people don't view themselves as things that change. They view themselves as a pattern that's moving. You might see a different spot of the pattern, but the pattern never changes. It's a self that was born with an intuitive knowing of the world in terms of the identities of things holistically. And if you're NI Dom, you spend very little time reflecting on lessons from the past, because introverted intuition is a way of knowing that's attending to what's in front of you now in the present and the emerging reality into the future. Neither way of knowing is inherently better than the other. They both have their ups, their shortcomings, and their strong sides, you know?
So I suppose my my reason for deeply analyzing the past is because there could be moments where I did something well and I want to learn from that. And there's moments where I did something poorly. And then maybe even my interpretations at the time were incorrect. And so I want, by analyzing past information, it better propels me into the future to adapt to new information.
Well, I mean, that's a good justification for using introverted sensing, but you don't need a justification for using it. It's like, yes, it makes sense to reference the past. Yes, it also makes sense to be mindful of right now in the present and what's going on. So, have you ever heard my potato touch story?
I have not.
So, I went to this restaurant. I used to go there. It's called Norm's. And I used to sit at the counter. And I noticed that when people order a meal, which comes with baked potato, the waiter would use their fingers to push both ends of the potato to make it open, and then they'd put the butter in. And I normally ordered breakfast, but I said to myself, if I ever get a dinner, I'm going to keep an eagle eye out so they see how much, make sure they don't touch my potato too much, you know? So sure enough, I go in and I order a dinner, and I'm remembering my plan, which I'm keeping track of from before, right? That this potato, I'm going to keep an eagle eye out. I'm sitting at the counter. When my plate comes there, I'm going to see. And then all of a sudden, my plate's in front of me, and I realized I got rice pilaf instead of baked potato. So this is an example of an SI type knowing the way I know and failing to notice what NI would have told me, if I were NI conscious, namely that you didn't get a baked potato, moron. You got rice pilaf. On the other hand, yeah, and on the other hand, the NI thing is opposite. They would have a different kind of deficit. They'd forget about their plans that they would implement and just be. They wouldn't stick to a game plan.
You're saying that the NI dominant would not stick to a game plan?
Right. I mean, the thing is, if you're an INTJ and you've got TE second, then obviously you've got stuff in the works. And this is the thing about TE in general. TE Dom ESTJ has NE third because other people's ideas will disrupt your ongoing plans. Like when my dad was alive, he was an ESTJ. I'd try to come spend time with him, but it never worked if I suggested it. I'd say, do you want to watch the game together, Dad? But he'd already be reading his book because he had already known earlier in the day that that's what he'd be doing at this time. And he'd hate to have that disrupted. He'd know when he gets up, like, I'm going to go meow, they're going to go make lunch, they're going to go to the gym, they're going to lie down, they're going to have dinner, they're going to have the fish thing over there today. They're going to meow. So he was just following through on his plans.
Sorry to hear about your dad. I saw him in another video. He was complaining about fireworks.
Was he?
Yeah. But I can't say that I have much of a future plan. Yeah, I have no idea what I'm going to do at the end of the day. I mean, being in the military, I have to be in certain places at certain times, the same as if I have a job and you have to show up and clock in at a certain time. But other than that, I have no obligations or plans, so to speak. Usually I have to enforce them on myself because, you know, my wife wants to go out to eat or something, and okay, I have to go feed her. You know, I have to keep her alive, so she needs food.
But do you tend to not feed yourself when you're hungry?
Oh, I'm horrible. I eat like ramen packets or just like bars. Like I try and eat the plainest thing that requires the least amount of work. Like because I see it as if I wanted to enjoy the experience more, I would make something nicer, go purchase something, but I could just simply diminish my desire for something nice to satisfy my desire to not do that stuff. Because like
Okay. So let's say you won a prize. The Navy gave out a prize. You won the sail hoisting contest, and they gave you $500 to go eat with. Now, describe to me how you would pleasure your mouth.
and I have to spend the $500.
Yeah, or you have to give the leftovers back to the Navy.
Oh, that's a real shame. So I would be a little bit annoyed because I would know that for $500 I would need to dress nice, and so because then I'm already thinking about the obligation of going to a place and I have to dress nice, and it could be filled with pretentious people, and I might not like the kind of vibe, so to speak, but I would also be excited by the prospect of doing something new and maybe going to a place and observing different people. So for a similar reason, I don't mind that at points this talk was contentious, because I view it as a learning experience. Because there's parts where, you know, life isn't always going to be exactly the thing that you like, and ideally learn from it. But to go back to the story, then I might decide to not dress up so nice, just nice enough, and then go. But there would be a lot of probably anxiety beforehand about just like, man, I'm going to go do this thing. Like I would do it, but there would be a lot of anxiety. But if
would you consider going someplace that you already know you like and only spending $100 of the dollars and giving the other 400 back to the Navy?
Okay, when you bring up giving the money back to the Navy, that's
you don't want to do that.
But like if I could use the money in some other way, but if it just, yeah, it just, you can use it or poof, it's gone, I would use the money. You know, it would be it'd be
So
an experience.
even if you think the fancy restaurant might be less fun, you'll go there so it costs enough.
Yes, but also it could be a really uncomfortable experience, and I anticipate that. Maybe I would be pleasantly surprised, but I would be honestly just kind of anxious because it's a somewhat new environment, but I'd also be excited by that. But I don't think life is about just being comfortable and being happy. Life is about subjecting yourself to new stimuli so that you can learn and adapt from. Because I see it as kind of like we're models for interacting with the external environment, and you have to update your model if you want it to get better. And so, or at least encounter experiences in which it has an opportunity to update. So I'd be doing myself a disservice by not going.
Okay.
Also, my wife would want to go, which is for me, trying to do things that when I can and where I can to prioritize my wife's happiness. Then I know she'd enjoy that, so I try and
Happy
do.
life, happy life. That's what they say.
Yeah.
Right. What kind of food do you like to eat?
Like lately
Would
I've
you
been
get
eating.
seafood, or would you get steaks, or would what?
Lately I've been eating a lot of like if I went there. Uh, Probably meat, because I know meat can be a little bit more decadent. It's kind of fatty, and then it's also kind of an expensive thing to get. Um, and so if I had the money, I could get something high quality. I'd probably choose something like steak or maybe lobster or something. But those are kind of generic, but I know it'd be buttery and good. But in general, I'm not very food motivated.
Mm.
I eat to live. I don't live to eat.
Do you drink coffee?
Yes.
Do you drink it black?
No.
Do you drink it with powdered creamer, or do you pour liquid creamer into it?
I had liquid cream. I had usually just like whole milk, and I don't eat sugar. But yeah, I'm not trying to act tough. Like, oh, I like that's what I see a lot of men do, like in rural settings, kind of where I grew up, but also in the military. Like it's like a sign.
1 second. Just give me 1 second to talk to Cameron. Hi, Cameron. How are you?
Good. How about you?
Work now. Oh, you're done with work? If you want to swing over here, for some reason, and hang out, pull walls, and I'm working on moving shit into the pod. We got most of it. But if you don't feel like coming over, that's fine too. But if you do come over, then I'll show you where the bag of cat food is and stuff. We can talk a little bit about that stuff.
Yeah, sounds good. I'll come by in a bit.
All right, cool. See you soon.
Okay, cool.
Bye.
Bye.
He's house sitting for me this upcoming week.
It'll be cool. He'll can hang out.
Yeah.
What was the question? Coffee.
Oh, right, coffee. Yeah.
Yeah, I see a lot of like if you enjoy black coffee more, then great. But I'm not. I in particular don't. I don't really care about impressing people about having preferences that are inherently, to them at least, impressive.
I mean, I don't think anybody's really would be impressed by drinking coffee one way or the other. I was just saying because there's, it seems to me like people with an more instrumental kind of SI are more likely to drink black coffee. But that's just, it's just a seems to me thing. It's not like there's anything to hang your hat on there.
I'd like to add, I had to go and milk the cow personally, then I would drink it black. So if there was an amount of effort involved to acquire then I'm trying to balance like preference and and the amount of labor it requires to derive it. Like because I could, you know, let's say I wanted a new fancy car. I could go and do all the work to get that fancy car, right? But that's a lot of work. Like I see the amount of labor and time, and so I'd rather just, you know, not want the fancy car. Just like I don't stop caring about fancy cars. Like that seems like a much easier solution to me than going and acquiring it. Like I don't care about the achievement or the status it brings. So why go and do the labor? Because I do care about that.
Right. Well, I mean, presumably, if you could get a really nice car super cheap, you'd say, well, I'm not going to pass up that deal, right?
Yeah. So yeah, kind of opportunistic.
Okay. I also don't believe in buying new cars. I've never bought a new car. I've always bought used cars. It seems like it's not very cost effective to buy a brand new car.
Mhm.
Well, I guess it depends how much you want the warranty stuff.
And I don't think people are inherently chasing the car itself. They're chasing the way that they'll feel when they possess the thing that they want.
Well, yeah. I mean, that's true of any object you possess, unless I guess if you're talking about like if you want to buy a guitar, for example, you're maybe hoping to improve your playing experience. But I agree with you. The cars, it seems like people probably buy them more for conveying something about themselves to the outside world.
Because the way I see it too is if you're going to expend effort to acquire a thing to feel a certain way, it seems much more effective to simply focus on just feeling that way without the thing. So as opposed to going external to try and derive those feelings, why not just go internal and cut out the middleman of the process of trying to acquire said object?
Well, because for example, I'm planning on acquiring either a new acoustic guitar or an electric guitar because this guitar is very hard to play. You have to push down really hard on the strings. It was fine until I broke this finger, and now it's like it's a little bit painful or tiring for my bone or something. So I'm going to get a new guitar because I don't want to experience the discomfort of continuing to play this guitar now that I have a little bit of cash to get something else, you know.
Well, I think so. You try and align your purchase with a reason that you can fathom.
No, I mean that is the reason. My finger, which I broke, hurts when I play this guitar.
Yeah, and that's
I don't want to get a new guitar. I wish I already had a great guitar that played easy, right?
Do you ever engage in some sort of kind of like I guess you could say magical thinking or impossible thinking, wishing that your finger wasn't broken so that you didn't have to get the guitar? Like, man, if my finger wasn't broken, I wouldn't have to get this guitar. Why can't my finger just be fixed?
No, because I'm not somebody who rushes purchases, who likes to make purchases at all. So by the time I buy something, I'll have thought about it for 6 months, 9 months, a year, something like that. I spent at least a year wanting to buy a shop vac before I finally went and bought a shop vac. So I don't really worry too much about like being too into buying objects. I just don't buy objects. Everything I buy is like stuff to consume. I should buy more objects. I should have great musical instruments. I'm a practicing musician.
Is it so? One of the big reasons for me to not acquire things, I'm wondering if you relate, is it's a hassle. So now me having all this stuff, if I move, I need to take it with me. It's not just the purchase and then now it takes care of itself. I need to maintain and take care of this thing. So I'm responsible to the stuff that I possess. So
Yeah,
it's a
I agree with you completely about stuff, but that doesn't include musical instruments.
Mhm.
Or or it also doesn't include tools that I use. I don't really use circular saw and shit very much anymore, or like a belt sander. I've got like a belt sander and a circular. I got like all your major power tools, right? I don't really use them very much anymore, but that's the sort of thing that, if you need a tool, you should get a good one. I think anyway. But maybe simply because I don't have any problem with pleasuring myself by buying objects. So
So you're saying that you don't derive the same reward that maybe other people that are more materialistic might derive when they go and purchase their objects?
other people who are more sensory. They're not materialistic necessarily. They're just sensory. My dad accumulated so many objects around here. There's so many beer steins in over there. You wouldn't believe it. But you don't need all those things. There's so many duplicates of everything, right? I agree that that's terrible. Like, you don't want all that clutter, right? But that's because the vast minority of objects are tools. Almost every object is not a tool. So, like cars, they're not tools. They're transportation.
So yeah, they're integral for you achieving a task. They're not supplementary to making the task easier.
Right. They don't impact the success of your endeavor. So your car, if it drives you successfully where you're going, you've succeeded in your endeavor. If it doesn't drive you where you're going, you failed in your endeavor. But let's say I'm carving some wood. If I use cheap ass like Chinese wood carver things, it's going to dramatically impact the quality of the carving I end up making because they aren't good tools. Like when I play this guitar and record it, it's a little squeaky. It's hard to move without making a lot of string noise because it's a 3/4 guitar. But so that's just something I got to deal with, right? It's like I got to deal with that or get a better guitar. There are things in life like that you should if you do it a lot, you should have a good one. Like if you cook a lot, you should have good knives. I don't cook a lot. Unless you consider ordering DoorDash cooking.
So if you did, let's say you didn't have the resources to order DoorDash because that could get expensive. Would you resort to making your own meals, or would you resort to just eating very simple, cheap items that didn't require the preparation?
We resort to frozen burritos. I mean, we have frozen burritos and frozen dinners in the freezer, and we'll eat those until we run out of them. Like we are run out of them right now, and we really should go get more, but we're leaving for a week right now. So yeah, I don't like to cook. Rachel and I basically can't be trusted with any fresh food. It can only be in cans, jars. It could be dry in a box, or it could be frozen. Those are the only kind of foods we can be trusted with.
Which makes it difficult for cereal.
Right, we can't be trusted with milk.
Yeah, we let the milk go.
Even if we buy just like a pint of milk, we'll probably end up having to throw it away because once it gets like 3 days into it, I start thinking that seems a little dodgy.
I'll drink it. I'll drink that much. That much will finish. But a gallon.
Well, we threw away like 18 eggs. We threw away a full package of hot dog. I gotta throw away that full package of sausages. And we don't even buy that much fresh shit. It's like I bought just little bits of it thinking, okay, we'll be able to use this. But as soon as there's like this sense that you're supposed to eat that food, you don't want to eat that food. You want to eat some other food.
There's another, I guess, like impossible thought I come across, or impossible wish, which is that I could be like just a mind that didn't need to tend to a body. So I didn't need to feed myself. I didn't need to wake up. I didn't need to go to sleep. I didn't need to do all these things that I have to do all the day because they're so mundane. And so if I find a purpose to exist that's worthwhile, then I don't mind so much doing these mundane tasks because they're still mundane. And so I have a similar issue where, yeah, I can't be trusted with the food and stuff because I'm just like, this is such a pain in the ass that I have to feed myself. Because I think about it, like if my car became autonomous tomorrow and became self-aware, like, is it going to drive itself to the gas station and fill it up with gas? But we're in this situation where we're kind of, biological vehicles that need to fill up our own tanks, and it's just frustrating because we're aware of the process.
So, do you have trouble going to sleep?
I used to have a lot more. I have a pretty decent schedule now, where because I'm on such a routine schedule, it's not so bad. But sometimes I stay up a little bit later. But I'm not really staying up till like 2 or 3, which I used to do that kind of stuff in the past.
Well, what I would say about you is you're either an ENTP, an ESTJ, or an ENTJ. You're one of those 3. So, I mean, in some ways, the way you talk about food and sleep and stuff like that, that's very ENTJ-ish, what you're saying there. Those words are very ENTJ-ish words. On the other hand, some other things you say, see, you were really describing your relationship with the past rather than actually exemplifying it. So it's hard to say. But some of the ways you talk sound like SI tool, but you could, in theory, be SI front stack and be an ENTP. That's certainly plausible too. You do display a fair amount of extroverted intuition. And I'm not, I think you're probably FI, but rather than TI, but I could be wrong. I don't know.
How could I be ENTJ? I don't want to take over the world.
I did say that. I said ENTP, ESTJ, or ENTJ.
I know, but I don't want to take over the world.
ENTJs don't want to take over the world. But they do typically, have you injured yourself? That you can remember an instance when you injured yourself?
Yes.
Okay. Did you notice it right away?
For something that's more pressing, like, so the one I'm thinking of, I injured my foot, but I have to put weight on it. So yeah, I noticed it almost immediately. But like, for example, one of my toes right now is like slightly ingrown, and if I kick it on something, it hurts. But I'm just expecting it to resolve itself. That might not be the case, but I find it very frustrating that my toe won't fix itself. And I understand a toe is a part of me, so why isn't it being fixed? Like I'm somewhat adamant that my body should just fix itself and figure it out.
Have you considered using nail clippers?
Using what?
Nail clippers?
Oh, it's in there, yeah.
Within there deep?
Kinda, yeah. I can't get it.
Hmm.
I have to be medical and I still don't go.
All right. Well, I mean, because that's boring. Right? That's boring. Going to the doctor is boring.
Yeah, it's another thing to like. I feel like I have so many tabs open. I don't want to open another tab.
Right. Well, so I'm assuming you've been operating under the general notion that you're probably an ENTP.
Oh, so I've type journey. The past 2 years, I've been cycling through 6 different types, and those are ENTP, ENFP, INTP, INFP, INFJ, and INTJ.
You don't sound TI polar to me. So I would eliminate ENFP from that list of possibilities. I'm pretty sure you're not an ENFP. You respond too much on point to when I say things to be an ENFP. You got a clear enough sense of where the salience is in what's being said. ENFPs like things to be a little bit more misty. Yeah, they like misty mist in their verbiage rather than precision.
My wife's actually ENFP, and I kind of adore all the little idiosyncrasies. But over time, I would just kind of point out, she'll say something, and what does that mean? And then she has to sit there and go, huh, because she speaks in a more figurative manner, and I tend to speak in a more literal manner.
What does it mean? It means, once again, Samuel, you're doing too much black and white thinking.
It's a nice balance though, because yeah, she's a lot I would say less intense, more accommodating, kind of softer than me.
Yeah, well, ENFPs compromise. That's what they do.
Mhm.
They're like ENTPs, except they compromise. There's good sides and bad sides to compromising. It depends on what you're splitting in half. If it's a cheesecake, compromise is great. If it's a baby, not so much. But the thing is, if you find yourself more rational than she, then another reason to cross ENFP off your list.
I would say one of the big issues is that I have a tendency to accumulate like a pretty tremendous amount of information. So any free moment that I have I'm not having to do something, I'm absorbing information, I'm processing it, I'm thinking about it. It's the primary thing I do, and almost everything else is a distraction, except for tangible things to do.
But when you say you accumulate information, you mean you Google shit?
It's up to.
Or do you mean
right now,
you just
he's at a
observe?
conference,
Both. So if I'm in an environment where, like, if I'm home, I'm Googling stuff, I'm thinking about it, and I'm writing down the ideas that pop up from that. But if I'm at on base and I'm around people, and that's not the thing that I'm doing, then I'm observing people. I'm trying to analyze them, break down their behaviors, and usually I'm gravitating towards people that I can have meaningful discussions with. So.
Okay. So, do you think you're making progress towards understanding things ever more clearly? Or do you find that with ever more information becomes ever more muddying factors?
I would say so, because what I'm looking for is underlying human behaviors. Hello. I'm looking for underlying human behavior. So that's why I've talked a lot about positive emotion or negative emotion, or moving towards pleasure, moving away from pain. I break it down into these very simplistic elements, because then I can apply it more broadly on everyone.
But it won't work like that. Because, like, look, why did I have this conversation when I did? The reason is Rachel said, Samuel says he's ready to talk to you right now. And I'm like, who the fuck's Samuel? And then I came over here and I looked at my comments and I saw that was you, and I saw it was 1 minute ago. So I was like, well, he must be right by his computer because it was 1 minute ago. So I'm not going to have to wait very long. And let's just see what happens. I've put enough things in that box for it. But that was that's how it happened. It wasn't any like, it sounded a little more fun than what I was doing, even though I didn't know anything about what was going to happen.
And that's what makes it fun, right?
I mean, that's not really what makes it fun. This conversation is good because it's a good conversation. No matter who you are, I'm not going to know what's going to happen ahead of time. It doesn't prevent people from having shitty conversations with me. But this has been a good conversation. I enjoyed it. I'm glad to talk to you. But also, I'm going to call it end because we got people talking in the background.
It's fine. All right. Luck with your moving.
Yeah, I'm moving. I got a pods. You know, pods. They bring this like storage container to your house. You fill it up. And they come take it away. I got one of those in front of the house. We're leaving most of the shit here. They're just liquidating most of everything, but we're taking a few things like a couple of pots and pans, because my parents have really nice kitchen shit, you know, and a couple of knives, and then some tools like extension cords and clothes and stuff, and that's about it. And then a TV and a little bit of stuff, but mostly we're leaving everything here to be sold.
I want to say, because you asked beforehand if I was okay with you posting this, and I don't really have any issue with it. So
okay, cool. Well, then I will post it when it finishes processing. Okay, so that should be sometime this evening. Sometimes it takes a while for Google Meet to finish processing the recording, but not more than an hour.
that's fine. Yeah, I like. Are you going to post it on live stream or direct?
No, I'll post it as a premiere. I'll post it as a premiere.
Okay, because that was one thing I actually did enjoy last time, was like reading the comments as it happened, and then processing from the server point of view.
There will still be a live premiere, and so you'll still get to see people live chatting, but it's actually not a live chat. Yes, you can have the bomb. Without it, you won't be able to smoke any weed. Okay, so cool. Nice chatting with you, and we'll see what people have to say about this video. I think it's going to be entertaining for people. I think it's interesting.
Hopefully. All right. Thank you.
All right. Thanks. Have a good one. Bye.
You too. Bye.